Good day. Welcome into First Take on, do you know what today's Max Kellerman?
Friday Eve.
Friday Eve. Yes. Stephen A., how are we doing? Good morning.
People, I would deeply appreciate it if y'all stop bragging about the fact that it's Friday Eve. Only 2 of y'all have weekends off. One other person never does. I'd like to
Who
remind
has weekends
you of
off?
that.
I'd like to meet the person. I don't know weekends off.
It would be y'all.
Yeah?
You know
Really?
what,
Yeah.
Stephen?
Since
We're gonna
when?
fight this week,
Stephen A.,
next week, and the week
Do
after
me a
that.
favor. Never complain about taxes, things of that nature, because I'd like your paycheck. How about that?
Well,
and
I
you get a
understand.
loss
I
for
understand.
words
I
for
understand.
once. A loss for words.
understand.
I'm available on weekends, baby. You want
My
to pay
bad.
me? Okay.
My bad. My
Let's
bad.
Get into it.
We can change the subject. We can move on. We can move on.
right.
We can move on.
Yes, coming up, Colin Kaepernick explains why he did not vote for president. You do not want to miss these two going off on that topic a little bit later in the show. And it's been a whirlwind week, so let's walk through what's transpired. Tuesday was Election Day. Early Wednesday, Donald J. Trump was named the 45th president of the United States. Yesterday, Pistons head coach Stan Van Gundy was very outspoken on his displeasure with the state of our country and the election. And Warriors coach Steve Kerr echoing those sentiments, disappointed in how the election turned out. Of course, disappointed in Trump being president, the state of our country, so many other things on that subject. So they say life is all about timing. And now today, President Barack Obama is scheduled to welcome Trump to the Oval Office this morning to start the customary transition of power. Then this afternoon on the South Lawn, LeBron James and the Cavs are scheduled to be at the White House to celebrate the team's 2016 NBA championship. Max, do you think teams in the NBA will start to boycott these White House visits?
Yes, I do. And Steve Kerr and Stan Van Gundy spoke beautifully about the subject. You see, an election does not legitimize racist, xenophobic, or misogynistic words, thoughts, and ideas. It does not legitimize them. It does not legitimize that kind of talk and attitude. There will be White House boycotts. Trump was elected on divisive tribal rhetoric. Now, hopefully, I think the hope is, I believe Steve Kerr touched on this, that was really just the kind of Machiavellian, the ends justify the means, and a cynical manipulation of voters, and that you know, that's not the way he's going to govern. A lot of people feel like, I don't care what you say, the ends justify the means. The ends do not justify the means. And if you sow divisions, that's it, I'm done with you. If you say the kind of things you said, the kind of stuff that would get a lot of us fired from our jobs, that would get you fired from your job, that's not okay. Even though the election legitimizes the candidacy, it does not legitimize that kind of behavior and rhetoric. Others will say, well, if it was a cynical manipulation, we'll wait and see based on what policy he actually enacts. If Trump behaves in a way as a unifier, Trump, the person who will govern, rather than Trump, the divisive candidate, then I think you will see fewer boycotts. But it would be hard for me to imagine a world in which NBA teams don't boycott the White House, at least some, if not most of them.
Well, I'm glad you ended your soliloquy with that point, because you're absolutely right. The operative word in all of this is some. And I'm going to say something here, and it's not going to come across as very popular, but we're real on First Take, and I know I am, so let me get this out the way. It's time for all of us to put on our big boy pants, all right, and our big girl pants, and understand what the situation is. Donald Trump is the president of the United States of America. Stan Van Gundy was absolutely right with what he said. So was Steve Kerr and what he alluded to, because racist rhetoric, misogynistic rhetoric, xenophobic rhetoric has no place in our politics or in our nation overall. We get that. We understand that. But we have to understand that if you're talking about xenophobia, obviously you're talking about illegal immigration, and what Trump's positions were on that matter. If you're talking about the Ku Klux Klan, endorsing him, that certainly didn't resonate in an affectionate manner with the African American community. We get that. But I'm a person, Max Kellerman, that has repeatedly sat up on this platform, on radio and beyond, elocuting to the masses, reminding everybody. Black folks make up about 13 to 14% of the population. The Latino population makes up about 17% of the population. Combined, you're talking about anywhere from 33 to 37% of the American population. Well, what about the rest? There's a white America out there. And by the way, let's make sure that as incredibly unfair as it seems, as wrong as it may appear to be, and there's no doubt that you and I both feel the same way, Max, in that regard, the reality is that everyone who voted for Donald Trump isn't a racist, a misogynist, or xenophobic. They may have paid no attention to that stuff. As irresponsible as that is, when you go to the voting booth, there are many people, a matter of fact, I dare say most Americans in our nation, who go to the voting booth and all they care about is their own personal issues. If they can't pay their mortgage, that's what they're concerned about. If they need a job, that's what they're concerned about. If they want health care, that's what they're concerned about. Their lone issue is what they're primarily concerned about. And so now we transition to the NBA. And I bring all of that up to say this. I appreciate Stan Van Gundy's position. He's absolutely on the money. And I applaud him because he's honest, he's educated, he's intelligent, and he's passionate. I love that man. Steve Kerr, I totally concur with everything he said. Outside of talking about sports media and everybody yelling at folks, we're talking sports, Steve Kerr. We ain't talking politics here. We're not trying to legislate the lives of other individuals. And by the way, Steve Kerr can get a temper tantrum himself on the sideline. So I guess he's throwing himself into that equation. But for the most part, what he said was absolutely correct. But everybody in the NBA may not share that view. A vast majority of folks may share that view because a vast majority of the players are black. But there are white players who may not feel that way. Just because they're silent about it doesn't mean that they necessarily agree. And Max, when you and I talked off the record prior to the election, you and I were having a debate. And remember, you were joking around. You were like, come on, Stephen A. I said to you, Trump's going to get about 60 million votes. You said, why do you feel that way? If you recall, we were talking about this weeks ago.
I thought he would get a lot of votes. I didn't think he would win, but I thought he would get a lot of votes.
I didn't say that you didn't say that. I said you were asking me why I felt that way. I'm not saying that's what I'm saying. And what I said to you at that time is there's millions of people who aren't saying anything. They ain't protesting the flag. They're not kneeling. They're not, they're not venting about a lot of things. They're just sitting back quietly. And when it comes time to go into the voting booth, they're going to go in there by themselves. They're going to close the curtain. They're going to vote for him. They're not going to talk about it beforehand. They ain't going to say anything afterwards. But in the end, that's what's going to potentially happen, which is why I thought it was going to be very tight.
I hear what you're saying, but I reject that analysis. In fact, what happened in this election is fewer people voted. Fewer people voted for Trump than they did for recent Republican candidates, but even fewer people voted for Hillary than voted for Obama in the last two elections, although more people voted for Hillary than for Trump. In fact, Hillary was more representative of America than Trump. Very slightly. It's silly to even argue about it because it was essentially a tie, but not in the Electoral College because in addition to white people being the majority voting bloc, not bigger than the multiracial coalition that includes some white people when that coalition has been animated, but it clearly wasn't in this election. But in addition to them having the biggest numbers, that kind of lockstep white voting bloc that hears that call to that tribal call to racial identity, the way the Electoral College is set up also overly empowers small rural states. The swing states and the small states get a disproportionate electoral vote. Therefore, when you say, well, let's keep in mind that there's a white America and that's who's spoken, etc. Okay, they were clearly more animated, at least the core was, by this candidate. But as a statement of fact, more people voted for her. And the idea that because African American, basically black and brown people in this country are not the majority, that doesn't mean that the coalition they formed, which is interracial, is not the majority, which it is. I mean, it is.
Well, you can say that, but the game of politics is played, particularly with the presidential election, it's played with that electoral college vote. So it ain't just about the numbers. It's about locale. It's about geography. It's about how many electoral college votes are in certain places. What I'm saying is the game has been out there for ages. Al Gore, George W. Bush, it was the same argument then. But in the end, what happened? We saw what happened. So it ain't just about the numbers. So bringing up the numbers is null and and void. We understand what the battle was, and you just have to deal with that, which is why I talk about
Oh, of
all
course.
of us putting
I'm
on
not
our
questioning
big,
legitimacy.
our big boy and big girl pants.
I'm not
But wait a minute.
questioning
I'll let you
legitimacy.
speak. I'll let you speak. I got that. I didn't say you were. I'm trying to get to a point. My point to you is when we talk about the NBA, we got to talk about moving forward. Because in the end, what it comes down to is whether it's racist, it's misogynistic, it's xenophobic, you got a whole bunch of people out there that believe that. And then you also have a whole bunch of people out there that believe you had an individual candidate that just said it because he needed to do what he needed to do just to get votes, to get in the office, because the politicians lie all the time anyway. You got people who actually believe that. So while you may have some NBA teams that are going to sit up there and say, ain't no way in hell I'm going to the White House to see this man, you may have others down the road who may not have a problem with it over the next 4 years, particularly if our economy is better and other things that they like are taking place, all of a sudden that might die down.
Yeah, particularly, there will always be, obviously, in any national election, even when it seems lopsided, as a percentage of the voters, you know, when 5 million votes determines the election in a country of 300 million, there is almost half the country who feels differently. So clearly that will be the case even in the NBA, which is a predominantly African-American and now increasingly European and South American league. You will still find members of teams who wouldn't. But I think by and large, unless Trump is true to his word in his acceptance speech, where he acts as a unifier and not as a divider that he campaigned as, well, in that case, there will be others who also say, well, wait a minute, he did what he had to do to get elected. It's not that we forgive that kind of lack of civility and that kind of public discourse, but he is elected now, and, oh, look, the policies aren't that bad, that sort of thing. But based on what we've seen so far, I would remain cynical about that, although hopeful.
There's no way that anybody's going to support him if he continues the rhetoric that he was spewing during the campaign. But I'm making the argument that you got a lot of folks out there. Damn sure wasn't you or nor I, but you got a lot of folks out there who voted for him, not all of them, but a lot of them who never believed he believed what he was saying, that he was catering and pandering to a constituency that was going to get him in office. God, listen, there's a constituency in America that gets pimped all the time. Let's just call it what it is. You got people out there that you know, they get fooled by politicians, or they recognize that politicians may be just taking a stance just because they're trying to get into office. You've got two candidates on polar opposite sides of the spectrum that are butting heads with one another. And what does Hillary Clinton do? What does President Obama do? The very next day, we must come together. At the end of the day, we're all on the same team, blah, blah, blah. You never thought that you would really hear such class, you know, such a classy approach to everything, considering how cantankerous and what a divide existed during the election. But in this great country of ours, people talk all the stuff that they want to talk during the election process, and then when the election is over and a winner has then been defined, all of a sudden you transition to governing, and that's the way it goes. So when the NBA talks about, if everybody thinks that for 1 second that no NBA team or no NFL team or nobody's going to go into the White House, if you ask me that question right now, would they want to go, you know, January 30th or something like that? Hell no, too soon. But come to me next year, and let's see if we're not hearing folks talking about let's all be as one, let's all come together and respect the office. I guarantee you, people are going to take a shift. Don't think otherwise for 1 second.
I agree. There are likely going to be teams, if, as you say, the governance is different than the rhetoric during the campaign, that will soften their position. And hopefully the governance is different than the rhetoric during the campaign.
It has to be, no doubt.
Let's leave it there.